Welcome to the Silicon Valley Clean Energy Authority Board of Directors meeting on Wednesday, October 13th. This meeting will be conducted in accordance with the California Government Code, Section 54953E, in consideration of the COVID-19. All members of the Silicon Valley Clean Energy Board of Directors and the staff will participate in this meeting by teleconference. The public may provide comments on any matter listed on the agenda. Speakers are customarily limited to 3 minutes. However, the board chair may increase this time, but at no point will the speaking be less than 1 minute. And let's see, decrease the time, blah, blah, blah. The length of the agenda and the complexity of the subject matter will determine the speaking time. And I think we also have an opportunity for the public to speak. May we have a roll call, please?
Yes, Vice Chair.
I'm here.
For the record, we did receive notice earlier that Chair Abikoga and Director Ellenberg with Santa Clara would be absent today. So with that, I'll call the roll. Vice Chair Gibbons.
Here.
Directors Willie.
Here.
Armendariz.
It's Hilton. I'm here tonight.
Thank you. Flygor.
Here.
Tyson.
Here.
Rennie.
Here.
Chua.
Here.
Elahi.
Present.
Martinez Beltran.
Here.
Walia.
Here.
And Larson.
Here.
We have a quorum, Vice Chair.
Thank you very much. At this time, we will go to the consent calendar. We have items 1A through 1J. Is there anyone of the board who would like to pull an item? Or anyone from the public wishing to pull an item? Seeing none, the chair will accept a motion to approve the consent calendar.
So move.
Second.
Director Chua and seconded by
Elahi.
Elahi. Thank you. Roll call, please.
Vice Chair Gibbons.
Yes.
Directors Willie.
Yes.
Armendariz.
So it's going to be Hilton for Almandar.
I'm sorry. I'm
Aye.
sorry.
No
Hilton.
problem.
Flygor.
Yes.
Tyson.
Yes.
Rennie.
Aye.
Chua.
Aye.
Elahi.
Aye.
Martinez Beltran.
Aye.
Walia.
Aye.
Larson.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. And we will now have our regular meeting. I am missing something here.
Chair, we need to open the public comment.
That's what I'm looking for. I'm missing it. I see what I did. I apologize. I took things out of order. We will now open the public comment on matters not listed on the agenda. And the public may provide comment on any matter not listed on the agenda, provided that it is within the subject matter and jurisdiction of Silicon Valley Clean Energy. Speakers customarily limited to 3 minutes, and speaking time decreased to less than 1 minute. And do we have some public speakers? I believe we do.
Yes, Vice Chair. We do have Bruce Carney has his hand raised.
Good evening, Bruce.
Good evening. I'm happy to be able to make a few comments on an item not on the agenda tonight. For the last several years, I have been very interested in tracking how different CCAs in Northern California source their energy and how they price it compared to PG&E, because it seemed pretty clear from the outset of the CCA movement that PG&E might have the ability and certainly desire to compete with CCAs both on price and on the level of greenness or renewability of their offerings. And I was nearing the completion of a document that I intended to send mostly to other CCA advocates, but it became clear to me the day before yesterday that the board might be interested in this as well, because it provides data on CCAs other than Silicon Valley that may not have been otherwise possible for them to analyze and think about. So the board and the alternates received a document, I believe this morning or maybe yesterday. And let's just talk about page 1, where Silicon Valley Clean Energy is highlighted, and PG&E's renewable energy and greenhouse gas-free energy for the last 4 years are also shown, along with all the other CCAs in Northern California. And it's pretty clear from this one page that PG&E has risen to the challenge of trying to increase the amount of renewable energy it is sourcing and the amount of greenhouse gas-free energy. So over the last 3 years, PG&E's averaged 90% greenhouse gas-free energy, still 10 percentage points behind Silicon Valley, but actually doing better than some of the other local CCAs. So for example, East Bay Clean Energy was only at 55% greenhouse gas-free in 2020. The subsequent pages deal with some pricing information. Many CCAs are pricing either at parity or above the price that PG&E is charging, including as high as 7.1% above PG&E at Marin Clean Energy. And within the advocacy community, there was a lot of hubbub when the nuclear allocation became available to CCAs. And we now see that in 2020, about half of the CCAs have some degree of nuclear in their power content label, although San Jose and Silicon Valley are the only two that have more than 10% nuclear. Anyway, I think this comparison might help with discussions that happen tonight or at future board meetings, and I just wanted to make sure you all had access to it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Carney. Very much appreciate this information, and it's quite a bit to digest. So thank you for helping us with that information. And with that, if I can get my computer to agree with me. We'll go back to the main agenda. And we will, at this point, go to the regular calendar to item number 2, the CEO's report. And we will have that done by our CEO, Mr. Balanchandra. And I believe we're going to have some introductions.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Gibbons, members of the board. As far as the CEO report, I don't have anything other than introductions that I'll do. There are a couple of items related to our power content label and our vaccination policies, and some other items are coming up in Monica's presentation. So we have several new employees at SVCE, and today we've introduced 6 of them on paper, and we have 4 of them present today, and they will be introducing themselves to you. We'll start with Maren Wenzel, who is working in the Power Resources Group for Monica. Maren?
And hello, everybody. It's very nice to meet you virtually. Yeah, so I am coming from PG&E. I just joined SVC a couple weeks ago, and I'm very happy to be here. At PG&E, I primarily worked in integrated resource planning and also on some of the CAISO system analyses, long-term CAISO system analyses. I'm going to continue to do a fair amount of that here at SVC, but I'm very happy to be doing it in the context of the organization's more progressive decarbonization goals. So very excited to jump into some of that. When I'm sort of not thinking about decarbonization, I spend time playing soccer, and in a pre-COVID world, spent a lot of time traveling, and I'm looking forward to getting back to that again soon. And hopefully, you know, when that time comes, we can also meet in person as well. So looking forward to that. Thanks.
Thank you, Maren. Welcome.
Thank you. We'll next have Zach Lisk introduce himself.
Yes, thank you, and good evening, members of the board. Zach Liskey, new Power Contracts and Settlements Manager, working in Monica's Power Resources Group. I come to SVCE, just started a couple weeks ago, and was previously with Northern California Power Agency and CPA, and was in their Power Settlements group there, and was working closely with a few other of the Bay Area CCAs, and so really interested to jump to this side of the equation, and I'm excited to be here and working with all of you in the future. So thank you.
Thank you, Zach. We'll see if your jumping skills are good for some other activity when we get all together.
Next up is Charles Grinstead.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Charles Grinstead, Power Resources Manager, reporting to Monica Padilla. Formerly, I was at Clean Power Alliance, where I was managing the resource adequacy portfolio. Here at Silicon Valley, I'll be focusing also on resource adequacy, as well as some short-term and mid-term procurement, such as RPS, carbon-free, and power hedging. When I'm not doing these things, I'm trying to stay active and doing some rock climbing. And then, with the winter coming up, I'll be looking at doing some skiing and snowboarding. Pleasure to meet you all, and looking forward to all the great work that we're going to do. Thanks.
Thank you, Charles. And we're sure you're going to bring lots of snow for the rest of us so we get there in the spring.
Will do.
Right. And last we have Naomi Moraes.
Hi, everybody. My name is Naomi Moraes. I am a Climate Corps Funding and Finance Fellow working at Silicon Valley Clean Energy on Zoe Elizabeth's team. I recently graduated this April, so pandemic graduation, very fun. Currently, the core of my project while I'm contracted to work at Silicon Valley Clean Energy, will be looking at researching the cost of decarbonization, but more specifically, building and transport electrification in Silicon Valley Clean Energy's service territory. And I am looking forward to meeting everyone, hopefully in the near future. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Naomi. And we have a great tradition of our climate fellows. So welcome, and we look forward to your information coming forward to the whole board.
Chair Gibbons, that's the end of my report.
Very well. And we now go to item number 3, which is the Clean Energy Procurement Informational Update. So this does not require action. This is an update being presented by the Director of Power Resources, Monica Padilla.
Good evening, directors. I do have a presentation. I hope someone's loading.
I've got it covered for you.
Thank you. I'll give it a second. So today I'm here very excited to welcome my new team as well. Got to meet two of them in person. And then, so we're excited. We had a really great day of collaborating, and I think everybody's ready to kind of meet the challenge to provide a clean portfolio for the SVCE community. So today I'm just here to provide a brief update on where we are with respect to meeting our clean goals and some challenges that we're facing, not just SVCE, but many of the load serving entities in California. And so I'm happy to take questions at any point. So we can go to the next slide. Just quickly provide an update on our RPS and PPA status, a little bit about reliability, and another update on the CPUC's midterm reliability procurement order, aka the Diablo Canyon Power Plant Replacement Order. Talk a little bit about where we are with respect to procuring long duration storage through California Community Power, or CC Power. Next slide. So this here shows our progress towards meeting our RPS, or Renewable Portfolio Standard. So if you all recall, we have a requirement by the state under SB 100 to get it to a certain percent of our portfolio to be met with what they call renewable resources. These are ones that the California Energy Commission deems to be eligible. They do not include hydro or nuclear. They're, for the most part, geothermal, solar, wind, and small hydro. So the state has a pretty aggressive RPS, and it gets us to about 60% by 2030. And right now we're at about 31% in 2021 or 32% or something like that. So SVCE's board has actually adopted a much more aggressive RPS, as we all aware, which gets us to about 50% on an annual basis right now. And it's been that way since 2018 when we delivered our first year of RPS resources. And then at about 2026, it kind of tracks along with the state. So this graph here shows you our progress. And as you can see, in the near term, we've pretty much met the SVCE policy. In some years, we actually exceeded. So we're well on our target to get to the RPS requirements in 2030, and most likely we'll be beyond that once we finish our next round of procurement. Next slide. So we're excited that 2 weeks ago, we started to receive our first test energy, actual megawatt hours flowing on behalf of SVCE from our first project, the Slate Solar Plus Storage project located in Kings County. And we anticipate next week we'll start to get energy flowing from the PV portion of our Big Bow Solar Plus Storage PPA as well. So you've all seen this map before. This shows just how we've diversified our portfolio in terms of technology, in terms of size, counterparty, and then location as well. And so you've all heard me say it before, we've done about $1.6 billion worth of resources, and we're excited to bring at least 10 new projects online. These are ones that are being built on behalf of SVCE and 3CE.
So Monica, I'm going to interrupt and just have everybody take a moment to realize what an accomplishment that is, bringing our own power online. Well done, staff, everyone, and congratulations to the board and our CEO. Major milestone, extremely incredible. Thank you.
Yep. And we didn't bring the grid down, so that's good. Everything still works. All right, next slide. This is a picture. So Pam and her team have been tracking the development of our projects really closely. And in fact, they put a new page on our website where you can monitor all the development of our projects yourself. So these are the three that have broken ground. And so that includes the Slate project, the geothermal, the Casa Diablo geothermal, otherwise we call it ORMAT, and then our Big Bow project. Next slide. In terms of what our focus is right now with PPAs, now that we're operational, a lot of our efforts have been kind of pivoted to figuring out how to bring these projects online in a very kind of seamless manner, and figure out how we're going to work with the developer and settle these contracts, develop strategies to schedule these contracts. Once they come online, the batteries have this ability for us to determine how we want them to bid into the ISO. So we're working on all of that. I think the big thing to note, as we've mentioned before, some of these projects are facing delays, and those delays are for reasons beyond our control, and not, most of them have something to do with COVID-19 related delays. There's been labor shortages locally and globally, and supply chain delivery issues that have really kind of put a strain on being able to get these projects online. So we're working really closely with the developer, getting updates as often as possible, communicating with the CPUC on these delays as well. So we're doing everything we can within our power to bring these contracts on as quickly as possible, because these are valuable resources to us for many reasons, for energy, for resource adequacy, and of course for the cleanness of them. I think the next thing you're going to see in terms of PPAs from us is in November, we will bring to you a coordinated operating agreement that we'll sign with Central Coast Community Energy. And this will establish a lot of the rules, the governance, the decision-making, the resolution process on how we're going to operate these 13 contracts or 12 contracts that we've signed with them. And so this is going to be very much an operational document, but you'll see it in November. And then you can see there at the bottom, that's the link to the website where we have all the information about our PPAs right now. Next slide. Here is a calendar, a very aggressive calendar on all the resources that are coming online between essentially this quarter, so the end of this year, all the way through the fourth quarter of 2023. So really just 2 years. And so you can see we've got quite a bit of stuff that we're bringing online. Next slide. And then this graph here shows our overall progress towards meeting our carbon-free or our clean goal. So this includes not only the renewable portfolio standard of those CEC eligible renewable resources, but also the RPS, non-RPS, such as the large hydro and for 2021, which is in here, the nuclear resources that we've been allocated. And so you can see that while we have made progress, we still have a lot of white space between our goal of 100% and what we've procured so far. And so we're trying really hard to find good resources to close that gap. But hydro, not just in California, but throughout the whole Northwest, has become a much more complicated and expensive resource to procure. So we're hoping that we'll continue to get a good allocation from PG&E on an annual basis of their large hydro and nuclear until 2024 when the project goes offline. But we're going to have to find other resources to make up the difference if we're going to keep this 100% clean goal. And we'll be talking to you about that in the future, especially as we go through our IRP process. Next slide. So the other thing that we're really focused on right now, in addition to bringing our projects online, is dealing with reliability and resource adequacy. So resource adequacy is in the process of being reformed in California, really kind of being driven by the high penetration of RPS that we intend to get to by 2030, and that's again 60%. And then more importantly, we have a goal as a state to get to 100% carbon free by 2045. So this is going to require, and there's a lot of discussion going on right now at the CPUC level, at the CEC, at the CalISO, about how we're going to get to this carbon-free, reliable grid. Like, what is going to happen when we phase out natural gas entirely, or can we ever phase out natural gas entirely? What's going to happen when Diablo Canyon actually shuts off? You know, what is that going to do to our grid in terms of reliability and the emissions for the state? And then will our load continue to change? And we've seen a dramatic, over the last 10 years, shift in the peak because of electrification, electric vehicles, just the way a lot of rooftop solar has really changed the way that load performs on a daily basis and becoming more and more difficult to predict. So this has all led to a lot of kind of discussions again at those 3 agencies at the state level. I think the one that we're watching most closely, however, is this reform. It's called the Resource Adequacy Reform now, and that's really going to establish a new framework for us in 2024 and beyond. And we're not quite sure how our portfolio is going to perform under our new structure, and we don't know what it's going to cost us in terms of being able to meet these requirements. So this is important for us to be a part of the discussion and advocate for good design here. And then the last thing that the last 2 things that we're following here, number 5 and 6, is the integrated resource planning process for 2022. So that's kicking off pretty soon, and the CPUC is talking about what their preferred system plan is right now. So now that we have Mar in here, she's following this very closely, and we'll be bringing information to you as we learn more. And then last is this procurement order. This is a direct result of the CPUC's integrated resource plan process for 2020. Again, we've talked to you about these procurement orders in the context of reliability. I think the next slide, if we go to the next slide, you could see the magnitude of these orders. And so in 2019, and this was resulting from the 2018 IRP, the CPUC ordered 3,300 megawatts of new procurement, new capacity to come online as early as 2021 through 2023. And our share of that was 67 megawatts. We've met that requirement. We checked that box. And then in 2021 of March, there was another procurement order that was issued for the summer of 2021. And this was as a result of what happened in 2020 with the rolling blackouts. For this procurement order, the CPUC allocated the whole responsibility to the investor-owned utilities. And then our customers would pay for it via this cost allocation mechanism, so a non-bypassable charge on the PG&E bill. And then most recently, we've got the big whammy of an order, and this is what we call the midterm reliability procurement order, or the Diablo Canyon replacement. This ordered 11,500 megawatts of new capacity. This is capacity is not planned for right now, to come online as soon as 2023. Our share of this is 237 megawatts, so quite significant. If you think about it, our peak capacity is about 800 megawatts, 840 megawatts, so it's not an insignificant amount. And then there's talk about an additional procurement order for 2022 and 2023. The elements of that procurement order are not known yet. We think it's going to be 5,000 megawatts. We just don't know if it's going to be allocated to the individual load serving entities, such as ourselves, or if it will be allocated to a central procurement entity, such as PG&E, to procure on our behalf. I'm going to pause here for a sec and see if anybody has any questions. I see Director Wiley.
I see Director Wiley. Yes, thank you.
Great. Yeah, thank you. So far, so good on the presentation. Thank you. Kind of my nature, always wanting to be looking ahead, looking out in the future. So, well, there's what appears to be the first one, the last line there, 2021. Can you give us any ideas about, well, what next? What possibilities are also out there for 2022, 2023? I mean, we got aggressive goals. Any ideas on where we're going to be going next?
Well, we're not certain how we can bring 5,000 megawatts online by 2022, first of all. That's a tall order of new capacity. When you think about what it takes to build a project in California, I mean, you have to get the permits, you have to get a developer willing to build the project and finance, and then you have to get to the Cali sales interconnection process. And so realistically, we see about a 3 to 4 year lead time necessary to bring a new project online. So we're still waiting, we're still trying to understand how and this 5,000 megawatts, if it does get ordered, could be built as soon as next summer. So beyond this, I think that the real big procurement requirements and order is coming in under this midterm reliability procurement. And so that's the big thing, and that has many components to it. And I can skip to the next slide and talk about that, and it'll break down what the requirements are there.
Okay, great.
I do see some other questions too, though, so I don't know if you want me to.
Yes. Director Wiley, are you all set with the information so far?
I would appreciate a moment for.
Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to make sure Director Wiley was all set.
Sorry, name sounds familiar. I thought you called on me. My apologies.
It's okay. And yes, Director Wiley.
I'll wait for.
No, we're all set. You're all set, please.
Okay. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
I have to remember that. I have to watch for that. Thank you, Chair Gibbons, and thank you, Monica. Quick question. You touched upon a couple of things. A little clarity for me, at least, would be very helpful. You referred to the natural gas situation. You were talking about once Diablo Canyon, the nuclear shuts down, and the fact that we are still using natural gas and there are changes expected in our load. How do you see SVCE responding? Because your next comment was, we don't know how it could impact our price. So those are the two things. And then the second question was maybe a little clarity for me in the midterm reliability in your current slide, the 237 megawatts that is SVCE's share. Can you please help me understand that? Again, probably tagging on to Director Wiley's question about looking ahead.
Yeah, so the first part of the question, if I understand it, is with natural gas, if natural gas were to be phased out, because natural gas is a resource right now that we use very much for reliability. And when the Diablo Canyon actually shuts down, because I don't think there's going to be a reversal on that decision. I think it will shut down. How are we going to meet our reliability requirements or needs for the whole grid? I think that's what the CPUC and the CalISO are working on right now. So this reform that they talk about that'll start in 2024, we'll start to get more clarity in the next few months. The CPUC is holding workshops. There are different stakeholders and proposals that have been put out there. We think that because of the portfolio that we have and the amount of storage that we have, that we should be okay in terms of meeting the requirements that might be set forth in that reform structure. But until we actually see what it's going to look like, we can't do the analysis about what the impacts on our costs are going to be. But we anticipate that our portfolio should fare pretty well under a new structure. And then if we go to the next slide, we can talk about the midterm reliability procurement order. There's a breakdown there.
Thank you.
And I apologize, it's Director Woolley, and I've missaid your name, I apologize. All right.
So this is how the 11.5 or 11,500 megawatts of new procurement order breaks up. It's done based on these different categories. So the first set of resources is what they're calling the zero emission paired with storage. So otherwise it's solar plus storage. And we've done a lot of solar plus storage already, so we know how to procure that. And so specifically for the entire grid or the entire part of the PG&E's portion of the grid, the requirement is to add an additional 2,500 megawatts by 2025. And then the next tranche of resources, the next two is what they call, oh, I'm sorry, the first one also has what they call some standalone storage. So this is storage that's not paired with solar or wind. It's just solar storage that can be charged by the grid. And then the next two lines there, the zero emitting resources, that's essentially a resource that is considered a base load. That means it operates at least 80% of the time on a very kind of steady basis. And that'll be your resources like geothermal, which we have some in our portfolio now, and biomass. And then this third row of types of resources that we have to add by, these are both by 2026, is what they're calling long duration storage. And so we've got some procurement that already in the works. If you go to the next slide, it breaks it down for SVCE. So here you can see that of that 11.5 gigawatts or 11,500 megawatts, the way they allocated the requirements to the different LSCs in PG&E service territory, it was based on a pro rata share. So they didn't take into consideration anything that we had done before. They set a date in the, they drew a date on, like in the sand, and they said anything that was procured to be built before this date is considered a baseline resource. Anything that was built or put into the queue after this date is a new resource. And so that was the only kind of distinction that they did per LSC. Otherwise, they just allocated us a share based on our percent of PG&E's load. And so as I mentioned, we're at 237 megawatts. We've done some procurement already, and that we'll be able to count. So our total open position is only 192 megawatts, but we've got quite a bit to do on these three categories. So our big requirement is going to really be under this area that looks like blue on here. And that's the standalone storage. We haven't done any of that. So we'll be issuing an RFP really soon to try to procure some of that, because we have to get these resources on as early as 2023, or else we face penalties from the CPUC. So we'll be maybe teaming up with 3CE to do some procurement on standalone storage there. And then the next big area or capacity that we have to buy is what we call this orange stuff here, or the solar plus storage essentially is what it is there. And so we'll pair that with the standalone storage in an RFO that we hope to issue late this year or early next year. To everybody else was already out there procuring for these resources, so we don't want to get out there too late. And then the long duration storage, the item 1, which in this graph is in gray, we're already in the process of procuring that, and I'll talk a little bit about what we're doing with CC Power, California Community Power there. And then the last tranche, this geothermal biomass type resource, we've already done some of that procurement, and fortunately for us, some of what we procured does get to count towards this order, but we still have a shortfall of about 7 to something megawatts of that we have to procure. And we intend to do that through CC Power. San Jose Clean Energy will be taking the lead on issuing an RFO on behalf of those in the CC Power group who want to procure, and they intend to issue that in the next month or so. Did that answer your questions?
Thank you. Thank you, Monica.
So when all is said and done, if we procure all of this capacity and energy, this will add about another 8 to 10% of clean energy to our portfolio by 2026. So if you recall, we're already close to about 57%. So this will get us to about 67%. We can go to the next slide. So California Community Power, this is the super JPA that was formed back in February of 2021. It was formed by 10 CCAs, and you see all their logos there. And with the goal of really just doing joint procurement to advance our local and state climate goals. So next slide. So before CC Power was even formed, the group of CCAs that were interested in forming this, a subset of the group of CCAs that were interested in forming CC Power, got together and issued an RFO in October of 2020 for long duration storage. We had ambitious goals. We were hoping to procure up to 500 megawatts. We didn't know that there was going to be a procurement mandate. We thought there might be a procurement mandate, but we didn't know exactly what it was going to be and for what amount of capacity. So we set an ambitious goal to buy up to 500 megawatts. Our objective was really to find cost-effective long duration storage so that we can integrate all of our renewable projects and help support the California grid with reliable longer duration storage. So our reason for doing joint procurement here was to kind of share the resources and share the project risk. We weren't sure what we were going to get in terms of project size or cost or technology. So we thought it made more sense for us to go in it together and to share in that size and project risk. As I mentioned, we thought that there would be a procurement mandate. There were certainly hints about there being a procurement mandate. And so we wanted to kind of get ahead of those mandates, or at least be able to respond to those mandates should they come out. And so we set some requirements. Our basic requirements in the RFO were that they had to have a minimum discharge duration of 8 hours. We didn't know what long duration storage was going to be defined as we didn't know if it was going to be 16 hours, multi-day, or what the CPUC might come back with. So we had to establish a minimum. We set it at 8 hours. And then we also required that it be a CalISO resource or have the ability to import into the CalISO, that it meet resource adequacy requirements, whatever they might be, that the COD be no later than mid-2026, and that the delivery term be 10 years for no less than 50 megawatts per project. Next slide. So we got over 220 distinct offers for about 9,000 megawatts in total, and 8 different technology types and about 18 specific technologies. And so you could see those on the right-hand side of the screen here. We ran a very kind of deep analysis to review all these projects with 2 basic rounds. The round 1 being looking at 98 unique conforming offers. Out of those 220, we had to distill them into the best offers per project. And so we looked at economics, location, technology, the environment, and developer. And then we narrowed it down from 98 down to 17 and did a much more deeper dive on the economics, looking at kind of the risk of the project, doing a whole bunch of scenario analysis. We used the Sun Analytics battery sim model, which allowed us to optimize the battery and see what kind of range of value we could see in the market. And then we also decided to retain for evaluation purposes, some emerging technologies. Those are the technologies that we considered not to be conventional, such as lithium ion. So if you see on the right-hand side, there's some interesting technologies there. We picked about 7 that we thought were the best emerging technologies, and we did a deeper dive on those, trying to understand the viability of them, meeting with the developers directly, understanding how they would integrate into the Cal ISO, because we all agreed that one of the benefits of doing joint procurement would be to bring on something that wasn't a lithium ion battery, something that was an emerging technology that maybe we wouldn't do on our own, but if we took a small share of it, it would be something that we could stand behind. And then ultimately we got to the place where we shortlisted projects, and then we started negotiations in June of 2020. Now we go to the next slide. That's pretty much when the CPUC issued the midterm reliability procurement order, by the way. So at the same time that we're shortlisting and negotiating, that's when we got the order on what we were going to have to procure. And one of the things that came out was the amount. And so it was much less than that 500 megawatts that we had sought. Collectively, it represented maybe like 4 times what we thought we were going to have to procure. Next slide. So where we are today with the LDS procurement effort is that we've actually identified one project to move forward at this point, at this stage. And we took it to CC Power Board of Directors on October 8th. Under that JPA, we're required, before the board can vote on an agreement, they're required to provide a 60-day notice to the public. And that gives that 60-day notices so that all of us can kind of start to socialize internally these projects like we're doing tonight. And so the first project that we've identified is from a company called LDS Power. It's a tumbleweed, long duration storage. It's called tumbleweed, and it's a long duration storage resource. The total project capacity is 69 megawatts, and that'll get split with between 7 different CCAs. And so what we're working on right now is finalizing not just the agreement between CC Power and LDS Power, but all the other agreements that are going to have to be signed between the CCAs and CC Power. And so our intent is to bring those agreements back to, I think we're going to take it to the executive committee, a little more detail about LDS Power's tumbleweed to the exec committee on October 22nd. And then we'll bring it back to the board for approval sometime in December. And then once CC Power approves the agreement after the 60 days, then all of the CCAs will start to get the approvals from their boards to execute these agreements. The next slide. And this here is what our kind of internal SVCE approval process is going to be for tumbleweed. You can see, just like I said, we will take it to the executive, oh, I don't see that on here. Oh, November executive committee, I'm sorry, meeting, not October, and then again to the board in December. Next slide. So just a summary of everything that I've kind of addressed today. So the procurement orders, the drought, and the scarcity of reliability of type resources such as resource adequacy are driving costs up. So we saw that in our fiscal year 22 budget, and we're planning for it over the next few years. Resource adequacy reform will produce what we believe to be additional planning and procurement challenges. And so we're gearing up to understand what those requirements are going to be and to figure out how we, not just SVCE, but collectively the CCAs in Northern California are going to meet the challenge. We expect there to be more procurement orders. Quite frankly, we don't think the CPUC is done. And so I don't know if that's going to be 2022 or 2023, but we're anticipating them. And so for us, what we're going to be focusing on the next, again, few months is to meet the midterm reliability procurement order, do some additional RFOs, either on our own or with CC Power, and then to really just kind of start to establish the framework for our 2022 integrated resource plan. And this is where we're going to talk about what's the role of natural gas in our portfolio. You know, how do we get to a carbon-free grid? What is this going to cost us? What are the trade-offs? How does this conform with our mission? And all those great questions that I'm sure you guys will all have in the direction you give us ultimately. So with that, I have nothing else.
Thank you, Monica. Are there any follow-up questions? Yes, Director Martinez-Beltran.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just wondering, Monica, in light of everything happening with COVID, we've seen an increase all across the board, and I'm wondering how that's impacting us.
Well, it's certain we've seen delays in many of our projects, and we've actually received notice of force majeure from one of our projects and potential force majeures from some projects. And those are all related, somewhat related to COVID. And then, but more kind of the bigger thing is just like this global supply chain issue where we have batteries that are sitting or components of batteries that are sitting in other parts of the world that can't seem to make it to California. And you know, we understand that there's just ships and ships and ships waiting to unload supplies at the different ports. So it's not just an SVCE problem, it's a global problem, and it's certainly a California problem as well. And so the governor's office and the CPUC are well aware that this is putting backlogging a lot of the development of renewables that were anticipated to come online as early as this summer. So for us, and you know, this does have financial implications, and we budgeted for it. So our fiscal year 22, we've assumed all the delays that we anticipated have been incorporated in the budget that Amrit brought to you, I think, last month. And so we have contingencies built into our contracts to allow for delays. And then at a certain point, we start to receive compensation from our developers from those delays. So we're hoping that in the end, it's not something that we can't absorb.
Right. Well, that's really what I'm asking. I just wanted to make sure that we have accommodated for that, because we know that the cost of supply is going up. We know the cost of construction has gone up. We know that these are anticipated costs, frankly, out of our control. So just wanting to make sure that we've got that in there.
Yeah, and our contracts are all structured with a fixed price. So the developer has a commitment to build the projects for us and deliver those resources to us at a fixed price that we've contracted for. So that part of it, we don't, I mean, if the project gets built, then we don't expect there to be a variation in costs.
Okay, perfect. And has there been any talk? I know you said that they're aware at the governor's office as well as the CPUC. Has there been any accommodation or talk about that as far as the mandate?
That's a good question. I don't know exactly how to answer that. I think that.
Oh, when you do, that's fine.
Yeah, I think the procurement orders are there to try to accelerate the development of capacity as fast as possible. And maybe we won't hit the full requirements collectively. But I think that even if we hit a fraction of it by 2025, we'll be in a much better place than we are today.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. And Director Arahi.
Thank you, Monica, for your presentation. I think it explains a lot. I was curious, these new procurement orders that are coming out, are they designed to replace natural gas with clean energy? Or I suppose some percentage is designed for that. And what percentage of it is for additional load that is anticipated because of the growth in California or growth in commercial traffic?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know what the ratio is. I mean, the load forecasts that I've seen at the state level are relatively flat. They're not, especially relative to the amount of generation that's going offline. I imagine that most of the procurement order is to deal with the shift in load, the net peak, the peak kind of shifting to later in the day, now like closer to 8 p.m. And then really to deal with Diablo Canyon going offline at the end of, I think part goes off in 2024 and 2025. And then there's the phasing out of what's called once through pooling units. These are natural gas facilities that are built along the coast Those were all ordered to shut down, I believe, at the end of this year, but they've been postponed. But they will eventually all have to go offline as well. And so then that's quite a significant amount of capacity on the grid. So most of, I would say the majority of the procurement orders to deal with the shutdown of nuclear and those once through cooling unit resources.
Understood. And the second question I wanted to ask is, do we want a higher or a bigger allocation of these resources, or do you want as little as possible? Because listening to Bruce Carney, is PG&E going in there trying to get all the allocations? Should we be aggressive to get more, or we are hands full as it is?
Yeah, the allocations are a mandate. It says you must go out and procure this stuff. So they won't build it for us. We have to go find these resources ourselves. And some of them are cost-effective resources, like some of the solar plus storage that we procured on behalf of the community. These are good resources to put in our portfolio. And when you look at our projected supply costs, the cost of meeting the energy, it goes down in the future because these are valuable resources. Not all of them are cost-effective though. And so some of the procurement mandate is going to force us to buy resources that aren't cost-effective. They're going to add cost to our portfolio. And so I wouldn't say I'd want a greater mandate. I think that for us, because local control is important to us, I think that our IRP process and our discussions with our community to determine how much capacity we should be procuring from different resources. But that said, we have a mandate and we will meet the mandate. We will try our hardest to meet the mandate.
Yeah, understood. I'm just trying to figure out if this is going to become a market share game where PG&E wants to just take over the market and there's less room left for us, or whether we want a higher share of that market.
Yeah, I know that if we don't do a well enough job procuring these resources on ourselves, there is the mechanism that in place for PG&E to procure them on our behalf. And so that's very much out there as well. So we have for those longer lead time resources, the long duration storage and the geothermal, I believe we have until early 2023 to demonstrate that we're making our progress. But if we can't, then we default to a central procurement mechanism. And so the more and more of that happens, the less and less decisions get made here in our community about what our portfolio is going to look like in the future.
Understood. My other question is probably for Girish, I guess, just understanding the procedure on the joint project that you guys, the joint CCAs are doing. There's going to be an agreement that's going to come to the executive committee to review, and then to our board of directors, but it's going to also be approved by the joint CCAs. Is the joint CCA going to approve the agreement before we do, contingent on our approval, or do we approve it before it goes to them?
It is, the CC Power board will approve it first, and we're looking at December 8th as being the earliest day they could approve it. It's 60 days after the notice was provided. However, the agreement does not become effective until all the members have approved it.
Okay.
So that's, and we have somewhere between 90 to 120 days after the CC Power board approves the contract for all 7 member agencies to go through their process. Part of this kind of long lead time, it's the first time we're doing it, and you kind of realize 60 days is probably too much of a lead time. And different cities, different agencies have different approval processes. And this, since this is the first time we're doing it, going through how we are sharing risks, we expect will take some time.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you. And Director Walia.
Thank you, Chair Gibbons. A question either for Monica or Girish, not sure. Looking at one comment in the summary regarding the supply costs that reflect the increased cost due to hydro, etc. So we are all reading about the already reduced hydro availability and projection in the coming years because of the drought. So the question is, I forget the percentage we are using for hydro, but it's also going to impact the overall grid in the next few years with the reduced hydro availability. So how are we planning, how are we projecting how much reduction that's going to be, and essentially how much the increase in price? Because that's that much power taken away, which is available in the off-peak solar hours, the way I am thinking about it.
Yeah, so when we brought the 2020 IRP to the board, one of the things that we outlined in that integrated resource plan was the problem with securing large hydro long-term resources at an affordable price. And so what we teed up through that IRP process is this concept of maybe looking at a higher renewable portfolio standard content and not rely on these Northwest hydro resources, because that's for the most part what we're receiving is Northwest hydro. And as those states are developing their own clean standards, they're wanting to retain as much hydro as they can possibly retain. And they're also having droughts in the Northwest as well. And I think Oregon and Washington saw some severe weather this year. And not just that, the cost of transmitting those resources across state lines using transmission lines that aren't very much in abundance is becoming more expensive. So if we want to retain our kind of 100% clean goal, then we're going to have to look at kind of divesting from large hydro, having a less of a reliance on it, maybe only representing maybe 10 to 20% of our needs in the future, because otherwise we're going to be at the whim of hydro conditions in the market. And so we'll need to look at having a higher RPS content and then balancing that with, the risk of losing load in the long term as well. We don't want to over procure, because if we don't have the rate base or the load, then we may end up with resources that we no longer need. So that's all going to be discussed in this upcoming integrated resource planning cycle. And so I don't know, Garish, if you wanted to add anything there.
Thank you, Monica. Thank you, Chair Gibbons.
Okay, thank you. And then we have Director Martinez Beltran, followed by Director Alahi.
I think you may be on mute.
She's trying.
Oh.
I'll have Director Alahi go while you're sorting through that, if I may.
Thank you. Yeah, I just had one follow-up question. I noticed on the different type of resources or technologies you're looking at, Monica, the hydrogen cell or the fuel cells was one of the technologies. And last time I had talked about Bloom Energy, and it appeared their fuel cells were really gas driven, but it looks like they're getting more and more into hydrogen driven fuel cells. And apparently in Hong Kong, they've installed quite a few of these hydrogen driven fuel cells. Is that a resource, because they're local in Silicon Valley? And is that something you guys should be talking to them or maybe looking at it a little bit more?
I'll let Garish answer that.
Director Alahi, thank you for your email from a little earlier today about that. I'll get back to you. Just looking at the website, it looks like the unit size is 300 kilowatts. My interest would be how they're making that hydrogen, from what source, and making sure that the emissions associated with the feedstock doesn't actually increase carbon emissions. So why don't I take it as a task to complete and get back to you.
Yeah, and if I can help you, because I've got some contacts on there, and we can see if you can set something up.
Yep.
All right, thanks.
Thank you. And then Director Martinez Beltran, can you try again? There you go. Nope. Nope. You show it as unmuted.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, we can hear you.
I don't know what's going on. Okay. On my end, it shows muted. That's fine. Anyhow, I think that the gist of it, I don't want to take you more time. I think the gist of it has been answered. So I'm going to go ahead and let that one pass. Thank you though.
Thank you. And Director Rennie.
Thank you. I wanted to jump in on the hydrogen fuel cells. That's something that I've been talking about at BACMed. And I have found out that currently with the state requires that the hydrogen be 1/3 bio generated hydrogen, and the 2/3 can be fossil fuel generated. So if you just buy hydrogen fuels for your buses or so forth, right? At VTA, we're looking at, do we go to electric buses or do we go with hydrogen fuel buses? I'm asking the question, can BACMed, or can we get some state legislation that requires there to be certified hydrogen so we know what source it's coming from? And that is looking like it doesn't exist. And again, that, you know, I'm trying to push that conversation at BACMed is how do we have a reliable source of hydrogen that is generated from electricity or from solar? And right now, what you get is when you buy hydrogen, you know, it's 1/3 biofuel generated and 2/3 fossil fuel generated. So something to think very carefully about.
Thank you for that comment. And looking around, is there anyone else wishing to speak on this item? And I can also go to the public comment if there's nothing from the board. Do we have any comments from the public? I think we do. Bruce, Mr. Carney, please join the conversation.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Monica, for a fascinating presentation. I have a question. Of course, you aren't obligated to answer questions from the public, but I hope you'll answer this one because I suspect the board might share the question. So California Community Power is a cooperative, conglomeration of all but 2 of the Northern California CCAs, and certainly all of the big ones. And what they're planning on doing in terms of procurement and sharing opportunities and risks seems like a great idea. But then there's all the other procurement, let's say hydro from an existing dam in the Pacific Northwest, where your counterparts in the other CCAs are essentially battling you for access to the gigawatt hours and best price and firmest commitment. How does the competitive nature of all the CCAs, plus PG&E, of course, balance with the cooperative nature of what California Community Power is doing?
Thank you for that question. We've talked about this a little bit in the past. I don't know if Girish would like to pick up on that now or follow up at another time.
Maybe I'll just give a short answer. CC Power is it's a great question, Bruce. I'm not sure I have a very direct answer on that. We each have our goals to affordability goals. And so I think there's a certain aspect of being competitive for some of our power buys. The point of CC Power is to try and do something that would be more difficult to do on our own. So I think that you're right on the hydro side and some of our hedging energy. Yep, we are competing with others, and even for some of our long-term solar storage, but it's things like long duration storage and even the firm clean resources, which is essentially geothermal. It just makes more sense to buy as a group because the quantities we have to buy in some cases are not the largest, so we could lower our costs that way. But let me think a little bit more about your question because it's a good one that yeah, maybe it's part of a larger discussion too.
Thank you. I think that falls along some of the discussions that we've been having too on that same, what's the benefit of CC Power and so forth. So thank you. If there are no other questions from the public, I see none. I'll bring the conversation back to the board for any final comments. I would ask one as a FYI down the line. I'm curious what knowledge we'll have about the transition to time of use and how that will ultimately impact our demand and our costs. I'm just curious about that down the line. Is there anyone else with any remaining questions? This is not an item for voting. It's an item for information and discussion. Everyone all set? Okay. And again, if I can figure out how to get my machine back here. Right. And that is the time of the meeting now to have board members make announcements and direction on future agenda items. So do we have anyone interested in a future agenda item or an announcement? I will just begin the announcements by saying a very marvelous congratulations to Director Flygore and all of the members of Los Altos for your wonderful new community center and really wonderful opening celebration last week. Wonderfully well attended, to be so excited about a great facility that I hope all of our members will have a chance to visit. And I've been very curious that in a year from now to see how you're going to do with your 90% attempt at covering all of your energy for that building. And also to Don Bray, who I know was heavily involved in your community group. So thank you very much for your commitment to implementing the goals of a carbon-free environment. And you might want to tell us a little bit about your facility.
No, thanks for that, Vice Chair Gibbons. We're very excited. Of course, Jen Pepper was on council and very involved in the design. And so having an environmentally sustainable building and LEED certified and everything else that goes with it was a priority. So you're right. We're hoping to power, well, 90%, that's the goal. And we'll see. It's a very ambitious goal, but we're very excited. It's our new beautiful community center. It's it's been in the works for decades, so we were very excited to bring it across the finish line. Thanks to everybody who was able to attend. Thanks, Vice Chair Gibbons. Very exciting. We invite everybody to Los Altos to visit and see our community center.
Well done. Any other announcements? Good news? I see no one. So that means we are going to be ending our meeting this evening at 8:09. I don't know if that's a new record, but I'll assume it's a new record for me since this is the first one I've chaired. Thank you all